So essentially, the Snow Leopard Trust has put together what are some really ethical practices which relate to documenting wild snow leopards. The issue at hand, is basically what we have discussed over the last 20 minutes or so about um, what can occur because of this demand for wild snow leopard images. And of course, much of this demand is uh, by photographers themselves who just want their own picture of a snow leopard, right? Obviously, people who are just plain old tourists who are coming to enjoy the experience. Many of them don't even bring a camera. Those are actually our ideal guests. They love the experience and really just enjoy the snow leopard. So here are a few ethical guidelines that we all feel must be followed. And so our travel company has a very similar document, which basically mentions the same points. I think what we'll do is go through these, and then we would love to have recommendations from all of you about if there should be any additions or modifications. The very first one, of course, is that baiting is unacceptable. This really is detrimental, as we've just discussed. Snow leopards cannot be disturbed. The whole point of seeking out such an elusive animal to be out there in the wild, to see it do what it does, is just such a privilege. And if your presence there as a photographer, as someone documenting it, is actually annoying it or is making it change its behavior in any way, then you're essentially negatively impacting it. And then what's even the point of being there to document it in the first place if you're going through doing all that? The photography at dens are avoided. Basically, cubs need to be left alone. We've often noticed snow leopard mothers basically somehow instruct cubs. I've gone hunting, and the cubs will just stay there and not interfere in the hunt. Will be at a very different part of the valley, and the mother will go through. And I've only seen a failed hunt, but the mother will go through the hunt, and then basically return to the cubs. And at that point, the cubs will rejoin her, and they'll walk away. And we've never even actually followed mothers and cubs. We only ever just view them on skylines or wherever they happen to be. And once they disappear, because we know that if we find the den site, and even if we are respectful, someone else will follow along with us, and then that den site will be revealed. So it's better for even us to not know where the den sites are. Distance is critical for almost all mammals we photograph and we work with. We always, especially for habituated big cats like tigers that are used to safari vehicles, that are used to people being there, or lions, or bears in Alaska, the animal decides the distance. And basically, if photographers or if tourists start deciding those distances, they can stress the animal. So if the animal's actually coming towards you, minding its own business, right, not in an aggressive manner or in a defensive manner, it can be managed really well with highly experienced trackers and guides who actually understand characteristics and behaviors of these animals. So if you're approaching the snow leopard, that is then a much more grayer ethical line, because depending on what the distances are, you will invariably disturb the snow leopard. Snow leopards really do like avoiding humans. Permissions are critical. All necessary permissions must be obtained. Wildlife departments around the world are really sensitive with documentation on their territory, which does not go through the proper processes, and it can actually endanger the ability of nonprofits to operate in that area, and can have significant consequences, actually, because people do get really sensitive about their territory and their turf, and not seeking their permission. So really always just a good idea, if you're doing anything that is for public distribution, for commercial uses, to have all those permits secured in advance, and to have great relationships with the local authorities. Drone images and footage are taken from a considerable distance. Would you mind scrolling down a little bit, Kosta? So essentially, you know, more drones are in use, just as we previously discussed, and ideally, you're not actually using any of the drones to actually follow wildlife, because that will invariably disturb them. It's not like snow leopards are used to drones and will take to them kindly. They will simply run away. And given the terrain, given the mountain environments, you can have snow leopards or any other animals sort of get really spooked out and lose their footing because they're running one direction and they're looking the other direction in the sky, which is just an unnatural thing for any of these animals because nothing attacks them from the air. So if you are doing drones, just, you know, really focus on landscapes, focus on communities, don't do wildlife. And when you do use drones, be careful of all the permits required, local authorities. So many of these areas are border areas in India, in China, in Pakistan, and Kyrgyzstan. So you're not only dealing with maybe the border security of your own country, but also maybe a neighboring country, which might be even less pleased about the usage of drones. So these are all, you know, things that I think are incredibly important to stick to. And if these are guiding principles, then the rest of the sort of documentation journey can go well and can be pretty ethical.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Behzad. And I think we have a few points being shared in the chat window that we can have a quick discussion about. Let's go through them.
And as if anyone has comments, maybe they disagree or have other things that this document doesn't encompass, it would be good to hear.
Yeah.
Just for the Walter Mitty bit, I have had quite a few occasions where I have not taken pictures of snow leopards and just observed them. So I always feel pleased that I've had the privilege to be able to do so.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Okay, great. So yeah, please feel free to share your suggestions or comments if you have any about this manifesto, which is yep, it's open for suggestions, comments. But as of now, this is what we were able to develop with support from Behzad, Ismail, and others who were out there in the field.
The only comment I would add is this might be worth making bigger than just snow leopards and just snow leopard trust, because I think a lot of the points here would apply to any wildlife, or at least a lot of wildlife. And so I would just encourage to think about partners who can help make this, you know, much more of a standard across conservation. Totally.
Yeah, and like in some areas, even camera trapping, for instance, you need to take permits to set up a camera trap, right? So even those points, I think, can be included. But yes, I mean, it's a good point, Matt. We can probably widen the scope of it beyond.
Like, I know, just thinking from my own current work background, this is something that could, for instance, be shared through the IUCN Species Survival Commission.
Oh, fantastic.
Who, you know, brings together people from pretty much any wildlife conservation organization that you can think of.
Yeah.
And I think they could help spread this quite widely and adapt it for different contexts.
Great. Thank you. Yep, we shall definitely. We'll be more than happy to share this. Great. Okay. Anything else? Any other comments? Last.
Does it actually say this is about wild snow leopards and it should be a wild snow leopard?
It actually doesn't, which is a good point. I think we should.
I mean, if it's submitting pictures to Snow Leopard
Yeah.
Trust, yeah.
While it does say,
No, it
as
does say,
photographers,
yeah,
it does say
say.
wild snow leopards. Yeah, it does.
But maybe it should mention that they're I mean, if they only want wild, they should say, or if they are happy to have captive, they should say it should be marked as being captive.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yes, I think that a lot of the discussion in the beginning and even last time was about, if it's a zoo picture, it needs to be clear upfront that it's a zoo
Yeah.
picture, right? Makes sense. It's a good point. Thank you. Any other comments else? I think, yeah, I mean, anyway, if others have any, okay, there's one more point from Harshad. An additional point on the responsibility of the wildlife photographer in ensuring photographs are taken ethically, especially during tourist safaris, silence maintained during such wildlife experiences, and so on. Yep. Great. Thanks, Harshad. I think there's somewhere it does touch upon it, but yeah, I appreciate your suggestion that we should try to make it a little more explicit. Fatima says, she has a question. Have you ever ran into people who might be romanticizing ways of life of people who live remote and perhaps unintentionally othering ways of life further? Sometimes it could be damaging because we are operating from the context of modernity. It could be putting them nomadic people as the part of the landscape and us as even more separate from nature. This division and wilding, I'm not sure if I've expressed myself well.
Yeah, it's so there's a lot of people who call themselves like that they work from different places, they're nomad, or they call themselves digital nomads, or whenever I hear the word nomad being used by someone who is not nomadic, I often have this picture in my head of how difficult nomadic life is. It is literally, I think, the hardest, most difficult type of human existence on our planet. Wherever these nomads are, if they're in Saharan Africa, if they're Tuareg, or if they're Rabari tribesmen in Rajasthan, or if they're in Mongolia, or if they're the Changpa over here or in Tibet, it is such a difficult existence. And so, sure, there are those issues, but whenever I think any of those people actually engage with nomads, all romanticism is instantly lost, because we do have a lot of guests who travel with us who do engage with nomads, and they just come away with this incredible amount of respect for how difficult these living conditions are, and for telling these stories. It is important to be able to tell that difficulty. And so I didn't show you those images really today of what other parts of nomadic life are like getting up at dawn and milking all the goats, or basically one person having to go out with them at 4,000 meters for 12-hour days as they're grazing, and is just entirely bored out of his mind, and has to watch for wolves and snow leopards and has no network connectivity. And so it's just such a terribly difficult life. And on top of that, to have a snow leopard break into your corral and kill 30 of your sheep, how would you feel about the snow leopard in that case, right? So we're all talking from a conservation perspective from our offices and places of work, but we're not the ones losing the sheep, right? And so it is this it is part of, I think, our duty and our job to tell this story with a deeper human connection as well, because at the end of the day, we're all appealing to humans. We're not appealing to snow leopards or to the sheep. So the story needs to have a powerful human context and needs to show and document the pain for both the wildlife and for the humans there. And only then can we tell a more accurate story. So I agree, romanticizing is problematic.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Behzad. And I think with that, let's call an end to this session. I just cannot get over the stunning pictures and the ethical concerns and issues and points that both you, Behzad, and Joanna have brought forward. It's really, really valuable, at least to me, but I'm sure to all the participants here. So with that, thank you very much, and see you all next week for the third session.